Hola estudiantes, soy señorita Schaefer y hoy vamos a repasar STEM Changing Verbs en capítulo 1A de sus libros de texto. La información que yo presento aquí está en página 27. Entonces, si quieres ver más, puedes ir a página 27. As we go through these videos, what we're going to do is at the top of every page of notes that you take, I'd like for you to take notes here, please. We're going to have a main question that we write. And then as you go through the lesson, this can help you to focus on, okay, how can I answer that question? This is our main goal for the day. And what I want you to also do is just leave a little bit of room beneath where you can answer that question. So our question for today is, how do we conjugate STEM changing verbs? This should hopefully be a review for us. We saw some of these in Spanish 1. We're just going to go over it together and make sure we're feeling good about it. When you're done writing that question, go ahead on to the next slide with us. Alright, so we have 3 basic rules or reminders here with STEM changing verbs. I'd like for you to please include these 3 things in your notes, and then we're going to do a couple of examples together. So point number 1, going back to the basics here. The stem of a verb is the part of the infinitive verb that is left after you drop the AR, ER, or IR. So this is how we're always going to find the stem of a verb. Remember that a verb will always end in AR, ER, or IR. And we're going to find the stem by chopping that off. So with the verb empezar, remember empezar means to begin or to start. We take off the AR, and our stem would be empez. E-M-P-E-Z. And this sets us up to add the appropriate endings. Rule number 2. Stem changing verbs have a spelling change in their stems in all forms except nosotros and vosotros. So what we're going to do here is we'll take the stem and there will be a spelling change in the shape of a boot. So you guys will remember we have the yo form, tu form, el, ella form, nosotros, vosotros, and ellos, ellas. The ustedes are down here with the ellos, ellas. And we're going to stem change in the shape of a boot. So we'll keep the normal stem in the nosotros and vosotros, but in all the rest we're going to have that spelling change in the stem that we talked about. Empezar is an E to IE stem changing verb. So we'll change that in the shape of a boot, and that would make our new stem MPAs. The last point as we review stem changing verbs is that there are 3 kinds of stem changing verbs. Jugar doesn't quite fit into these, but the 3 main ones are O to UE, that would be like the verb poder, or E to IE, so that's just like empezar that we just did above. Or the last main one is E to I, and that's like the verb pedir, to ask for, to order. So on the next couple of slides we're going to conjugate those 3 verbs, but please go ahead and do make sure that you already have this information copied down before you continue on. Alrighty, so we'll start with the verb poder. Poder means to be able to. So we're going to find our stem by chopping off the ER, meaning that we are left with pod as our stem. As you remember, we're going to stem change in the boot shape. So we'll go ahead and put our stem in the nosotros and vosotros forms because we know we won't stem change there. But poder is an O to UE stem changing verb. So we'll go ahead and replace that with UE, and our new stem will be puede. So we know that our stem inside the boot will be puede because of that stem change. And then we're just going to add the same endings that we always add. That's no different in that way, it's just the spelling change in the stem. So poder is an ER verb, we'll use our ER endings. So we have puedo, puedes, puede, podemos, podéis, and pueden. Please make sure that you have these examples copied down in your notes before continuing on to the verb empezar. Alrighty, the verb empezar means to start. Empezar is an E to IE stem changing verb. We already saw this a little bit on the example. So we're going to start off our process by cutting off the AR and finding our stem. So our usual stem would be empez, but because this is a stem changing verb, we know that it will be different in the boot. So we'll go ahead and put in our stem in nosotros, vosotros, because we know that those won't change. And then we'll go ahead and change our E to an IE. MPAs is our new stem. So that'll go in every section within the boot. Yo empiez, tú empiez, él, ella, usted, and ellos, ellas, ustedes. And then just like before, we can just go ahead and add our normal endings. Remember, those don't change. So empezar is an AR verb. We have empiezo, empiezas, empieza, empezamos, empezáis, and empiezan. Please go ahead and make sure that you have this copied down before you move on to the verb pedir. Now remember, pedir means to order or to ask for. Pedir is an E to I stem changing verb, so we're going to use that as our example. Remember that to start off our process, we'll cut off our IR, leaving us with the stem ped. That'll be our stem in the nosotros and vosotros form because it doesn't stem change in those forms. We only stem change in the boot shape. For our stem change, we'll change the E to an I, leaving us with the stem ped. And that is what we will put inside the boot. Now, just like the other ones that we did, our endings stay the exact same as they would otherwise. So we'll go ahead and fill those in. We have yo pido, tú pides, él, ella, or usted pide. Remember that the only changes from the ER to IR verbs are in the nosotros and vosotros forms. So these ones have I's. Nosotros pedimos, vosotros pedís, and ellos piden. Please make sure that you have this copied down in your notes just before we move on to our last page that has a few examples for you. Before we finish up today, I just want to give a couple examples of how these might look in a sentence. Número uno, si no puedes contestar una pregunta, ¿qué haces? Okay, and if we translate this using some of our new vocabulary, if you are not able to answer a question, what do you do? We can tell that this is you both times because of the conjugation here, the ES on the end. And you'll notice that in puedes we have the stem change. And here's our answer. Número dos, la respuesta. Generalmente le pido ayuda a otro estudiante o al profesor. Generally, generalmente, you can see that is the same there. Generalmente, le pido, I ask another person for ayuda, for help. And here it qualifies the other person. You guys will hopefully vaguely remember at least the le is the indirect object pronoun, the person to whom or for whom you're asking. And then this is going to qualify to who. So this is saying, generally, I ask help from another student or the professor. All right, so our question today was, how do we conjugate stem changing verbs? And we came up with a couple of answers that probably need to be included in this. First of all, if I were you, and you can always answer these the way that are best for you. Remember, this should be at the top of your notes. You should have this question, and now you can give your response. This way, when you go back and look at your notes, you'll be able to find really quickly what was the goal of this lesson, and do I know the answer? This is also a really good way to study for tests. If you read through these questions and say, okay, do I know how to do this? And then just give your answer for that. So if I were you, I would draw this boot shape. I would write down O to U, E, E to IE, and E to I. And then I would just write down for myself same endings. If there's more information that you think is important for you, go ahead and write that at the top. If you want to put one of your example verbs maybe. But if you feel like you've got this, then I'd say that this is probably enough. One last thing I'm going to ask you to do, if you have any questions at all about the material today, please go ahead and write them down on your paper. That way, when you come to help class or when you come back to class, you'll be able to remember to ask those questions. And you'll also be able to look back in your notes and say, oh, I had this question and I got the answer to it. Gracias por escuchar hoy y nos vemos en la clase. Adiós.